Karen, thanks for joining Megan and myself today. Really happy to have you.
Thanks. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. So I love to start with share a little bit about your story and how you got into practice ownership, because I think it's a little bit unique and different than the traditional get right out of school and start practicing, go into practice and start your own. So start there.
So for sure, I think that when I decided to go to vet school, I was an older student, I started at 38, it never even occurred to me. Oh, practice ownership wasn't even on the horizon. But what became very obvious to me was that I valued working for a smaller clinic where there was a great deal of choice over how we practiced. And, I left that clinic in part because I saw that to achieve the economic sufficiency that I wanted, self-sufficiency that I wanted, I needed to be able to structure how I worked and what the conditions of my own employment were such that I could make more money and hopefully retire before I was kind of forced out. I was kind of aged out of the game. And so I came to practice ownership saying, really, look, it's clear to me this is what you need to do. It really was not an option for me to join a corporate practice. It's not who I am as an individual. And because 50% of the animals that I see or that we see here at the clinic are either birds or small mammals, you have to have a lot of room to be able to be creative in what you do. So having a structure imposed from someone else wasn't gonna allow me the freedom to practice medicine the way I want to practice it.
Couldn't spread your wings, right?
Absolutely.
Do you have a business background? Because I think that's more savvy than a lot of people starting out. Is there some sort of business background?
I do not have a business background. I do have a background in politics and public policy, and I have a master's in the subject. And I worked in and out of government. And as such, I was very familiar with things like budgets and staffing because I was either establishing programs or I was overseeing government funds that were going to those programs. And so I had a good sense of that, and I supervised a lot of staff. So unlike a lot of veterinarians who have learned nothing about this no fault of their own, they're very busy in school. But I came in knowing how important my staff were as a resource to my own success.
That's wildly important, right? And something maybe you learn too late.
So now we're here. You're growing your practice. It's always been in a leasehold space.
Yes.
And just recently, you closed and purchased that building. What got you to that point? Why go from tenant to landlord? And I guess what got you there?
But there are definitely some moments when I say, what were you thinking? No, actually not that many, because I have had the advantage of having some excellent people around me giving me good advice. What was clear around year 6, so we're going to celebrate our 10th anniversary on April 18th. Around year 6, as practices, smaller general practices were becoming more corporate, we were also seeing a diminished capacity to handle these exotic animals. And I knew that there were plenty of vets who would be willing to work at least part-time in order to work with those species. I wanted to provide them a place where that could happen. Our space is only about 1,800 square feet, and we were on top of each other. It's really a situation where I always wanted to max out the space. From a business perspective, I wanted to max out the space. But I have done so effectively that my staff step on each other's toes. And so that's not quite literally. And so they don't, it's not a healthy thing for them to be in. They can't be, kind of moving each other out of the hallway in order to move an animal down the hallway. So the choice then was, are we going to, I knew I did not want to expand at all unless I owned the facility. From a business perspective, it just didn't make sense for where I am in my life. And so it was either going to be buy another space and do the whole build out all over again, or it was going to be to try to come to an agreement with the person who owned the building and her family. And this was the moment. They were ready to make that sale. So that's why we did it, because I wanted to increase capacity. I wanted to make sure that, at the point where I'm ready not to own this practice anymore or to be the primary person running this practice, I wanted to set it up for optimal success. My associates are wonderful doctors, but they are also young and they don't have a lot of other experience. They need time to wind up to knowing how to make all this happen successfully. So it was, to me, it was like, it was imperative. Either that or I was going to end up working until I was 80, which I do not intend to do.
You're so intentional about that process, though. It's like going back to, why you got into this is how do we keep private practice private? And clearly every action step you're doing is leading to that outcome. What's the driver behind that? How does the industry, because you're going to have, some practices that do sell corporate and that works for some, but for those that don't want to sell corporate, how do we keep the private practices private?
I think that there are a couple of things that have struck me in the last 18 months as I've gone through this process. One is creating a forum for general practices who want to stay private to talk to each other about what their best practices are. We have to find a way to be able to keep our costs low and not have to make up for the fact that we're paying more for our vaccines than, say, big corporate practices are. I think it's also very important to take advantage of opportunities when they come up to speak to this issue. So here in Massachusetts, Senator Elizabeth Warren's been very involved on this topic. I was given an opportunity to speak with her. Her staff have reached out to me a couple of times on this. And we have to work within our associations. Associations, as they have become swayed by corporate sponsorship, are swayed by corporate sponsorship. It's not a right or a wrong. It's just that's what happens. So I can think of lots of examples starting back in the beginning of COVID when there were opportunities to prop up general practitioners that didn't really happen because what was happening was we needed to respond to larger interests, chiefly around how and when staff here got vaccinations. So I think it's really key that we have an opportunity to talk to each other, share our best practices. I mean, it's been very helpful to me as I have worked with each of you to then turn around and say to other people who know you both or work with you both, in particular, Megan, as you and I have gotten to know each other better, saying to other people who I know are currently Jared's clients, you really ought to take advantage of Megan because she probably has a great idea. Well, because it's true. And that's how I don't expect Jared to be able to answer every question that I have. Certainly there was a time when I wanted him to answer all the questions. He's had the wisdom to bring you on and others as well. And so that just helps us be better.
So are you creating your own cohorts or are you finding them in the wild? Like, how is this working that you're communicating with these other like-minded private practice owners?
Well, for instance, when you guys had your last forum, I was scrolling through the list of the people who were on. I knew 3 of those people. I reached out to them afterward.
I love that.
Makes perfect sense.
Right, remember, politics, my first breath of air, of course. And, so I want to know who in this area you guys are already working with, because that allows me to have a side conversation. We're going to have to go and buy a bunch of new kennels. I'm not in one of these big buying groups, and I'm not going to be in one of these big buying groups now. Maybe in a year we will, maybe not. But I certainly want to take advantage of a buying group. I'm only going to be able to do that if I can work with some of my friends who are in those buying groups. But if I don't know who those people are, I'm not going to be able to do that.
I love it. I love that we're coming together as a community, right? Because we used to, I think where I started out, I was in a densely populated, there was a practice on either corner from where I was, and we were all like mortal enemies. And so I think we've come a long way now of private practices kind of banding together against the other enemy and helping each other out. I think that's like a really nice part of our industry.
Oh, I absolutely do. And when I opened 10 years ago, I was coming from a situation where I didn't leave on great terms. That practice is right here in my neighborhood. And I literally met with every single private practice owner in the area, except for that one, just to say, look, this is who I am. This is what I'm setting up. I am not interested in your business. I am not going after your rabies tags. This is how I intend to practice. And oh, by the way, if you don't want to do surgery on that rabbit or that hamster or that budgie, send them my way. And I will send to you whatever it is seems appropriate in the reverse. And I mean, some of those people have now sold out to corporate, but there's no better way to disarm someone than to say, look, here it is. This is what it is. I have never pulled a rabies report from any town in this area. Just didn't seem like we shouldn't actually have to do that. We should be able to do it cooperatively. And we have great relationships with our referral institutions. We've got, Veterinary across the street. We've got Tufts Walpole in our backyard. And we work hard to make sure that we are open and transparent and, to the point where if someone runs out of supplies, they call us. Hey, and Tufts shut down and their lab equipment wasn't working. Could they come over and run all their pre-op blood at our place that morning? Great. No skin off our nose, and we're just making better friends, right? We run out of some drug that we really needed in surgery. Hey, can we buy a bottle and we'll replace it as soon as we can? It's just, you got to talk to each other and you got to be able to help each other to build that community.
Makes it so much easier.
It also sounds so obvious and so simple but I just think it's so rarely done, and certainly not done to the level that you're doing, Karen, but definitely a message that people need to hear because, why not? Why not collaborate more and rely on each other? Makes too much sense.
I think it's so easy for us to silo. And I do think that one of the reasons that it works for us is first of all, I'm not going to say that it's not. The nature of my personality is that I want to work with people, but also as doctors, particularly in the world of exotic animal medicine, we learn best from each other. So there's always a lot of collaboration. We don't, in my staff of 4 of us, there's no finger pointing if something goes wrong. We had an animal go into a crisis yesterday in surgery, and the doctors that were in the clinic were all right there. We left what we were doing and we were right there to try to help that animal. I don't know that attitude is fostered so much, certainly not in corporate medicine. I think that people are just so busy running from practice, from appointment to appointment. And I know how much I can push my staff and not push my staff. I'm not going to make my staff insane because I feel like I've got to run 15-minute appointments because that's the only way to keep the lights on. It's not. We can do it other ways.
You can do it other ways, but that had to have taken time to get that understanding. You're 10 years into this. Did that hit you immediately? Was it a couple years into ownership when you started to develop the right cadence of how to interact with your employees, how to grow and nurture them the way that they needed to? Was there a point in time, or was it just innate in you specifically that you had it from the very get-go?
That's a really good question. And, I've really been struggling with this a lot lately. As Megan knows, I've had a couple of difficult staff encounters. And, the first thing you do is point the finger at yourself, and it's, how did I fail? How did I fail at this? And I've stepped back from that. I do think that there is a critical point of staff where I have always wanted a flat organization where everyone reported to me from a standpoint of who gives correction, who gives direction. And then I took all the admin tasks and basically spread them out to other people. And so, I've got one person doing inventory and somebody else doing all of the scheduling. And so that I didn't have to deal with that. I really just had to deal with the personalities. That worked until I had 15 employees, and it's not worked as well. And I think that was the critical number. It really wasn't about how much income we were getting. It was how many people can I reasonably pay attention to and practice medicine at the same time. And it is very intentional on my part because my employees are my greatest resource. So I got to know who they are. I got to walk this balance between a workforce whose values are, in some cases, diametrically opposed to values that I was raised into the workforce. They want a work-life balance. And I think that I have finally come to realize that in a lot of what I did, I was addressing and meeting the needs of the individual, irrespective of the needs of the clinic. So, for instance, talking about how people get scheduled 10-hour days or 8-hour days. And it was a big discussion here. I rolled over and gave the staff 10-hour work days that are, you want to work 4 10s. Your productivity is going to go down. Don't tell me it's not. And believe me, I would want to be your client at hour 1 rather than hour 9. But let's just see how this goes. It's been okay. All of that is correct. They're really good at being able to wash the floor in hour 9, not so good at being surgery in hour 9. But it has taught me that was the wrong thing to roll over on, because it does not match up when you have doctors working 8-hour days. So you have a mismatch in your team, and you can try to give them more admin responsibilities, but it doesn't work. And then you have to do more work to try to create it so that it works for them. But you know what? That's not okay. If they don't want to, if that's what's going to make or break it for them, whether they work 10-hour days or 8-hour days, then maybe they're not the right fit. I'm not looking to work people to the bone, but I am looking to make sure that the needs of the clinic are met. And those 8-hour days with doctors working 8-hour days is much better to match up. And my staff isn't as tired. And honestly, you know what's happened? Most people have dropped down to like 36 hours a week. So they'll work 4 8-hour days and 1 6-hour day or something. And that's even better.
I've always really loved and admired that you are so open with your staff. I feel like you're very forthcoming. You listen to what they want and hear them. And maybe it's not what you want, but you're willing to have that conversation. And I think that goes so far for your relationship with your staff and showing that you're even open to the conversation. Maybe it's a no at the end, but we can still have the conversation, right?
Well, I mean, I also want to say that, some of the work that you and I have done lately to create the structures for the performance reviews, and, you're the one that guided me to say, let's make this about your values. What are your top 5 values? And, as I've gone through the one-on-ones, people have loved that. I mean, they love it. They love that I've got this sheet for them, and here are the questions underneath it. And the next time we meet, we're going to talk about your perspective on that and my perspective on that. And even if I only take 15 minutes with them, that 15 minutes they know is their time with me, and they can say whatever they want, and they all come in having something written. And I honestly do believe it's my intent, as to use your word, Jared, my intentionality to give them that time. A lot of these young people are coming out of corporate practices, and the amount of disrespect that has been shown to them and the stories that they have told me of supervisors and practice owners yelling at them in the hallway. And I mean, like, one person says one snarky thing here, and I'm like all over it. Like, no, we don't talk to each other here like that. We don't.
Again, that mindset, though, just doesn't happen because you're trained to make decisions, manage off of a balance sheet and P&L. But a lot of what you're saying will not show up on a stat sheet, but it does, because inherently by being good to your team, managing your people well, empowering them is going to make you more profitable at the end of the day. Because I can guarantee your attention is next to none. You have a great culture, you have a great clientele. All of that is because the time and effort and attention spending these 15-minute meetings and listening and learning to your team.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that in these last couple of months, because of the stress of buying the building and getting the build out underway and all the rest of that, I think some of that I personally have lost focus on. So I'm also really willing to take a hard look at myself when I have not done something. We had a staff meeting where I was very open with staff, sort of like invited them, hey, I hear you're unhappy. Let's lay it on the table. And it really went south. It was a very bad experience for me. And I was traumatized by it. I'm calling Megan. I'm like, I'm ready to quit. I'm not doing this anyway. The good part of it was that I could then come around and see you have one staff person who is in a very delicate situation. And so you just have to be clear and not, it's taken me weeks to come to a place where I'm going to sit down with her and I'm going to do it from a place that is not emotive. I cannot talk to her if I am going to be coming from my hurt feelings because she said mean things to me. She did say mean things to me. But to talk to her about it and have it have an impact means I have to say, so I was really hurt by what you said, but let's talk about this because you accused me of something that I didn't do. And what you accused me of really bothers you. And that's something you've got to work out with your support team outside this clinic. That's, you know what I mean? Because I don't want to be in the role of playing therapist to anybody either. I did a little bit of that and I don't want to do that. But it's so easy because the work is so intense and you're losing animals and saving animals and everybody has so much emotion that's bringing you. You're just running and running. And those emotions can just spin out of control. So as the boss, I have to recognize when my own emotions are spinning out of control and call them back and take a good hard look at what I did right and what I need to improve on.
I think kudos to you for even being able to acknowledge that, right? Acknowledge the hurt feelings. That's a vulnerability. Acknowledge that we got to get the feelings out of the way. That's being the adult in the room, right? And then acknowledging we have to go back and address her when really you just want to like crawl under a rug, stick your head in the sand and ignore it. So I think that those are all like very important nuggets for people to take away.
I'm also, that's not all just about the soft stuff too. I'm also very transparent with the staff about when we raise prices, why we raise prices. Jared, just so that you know, we did just go through that whole thing about raising prices. And at the same time, the staff is so excited to see the construction going on. And they're like gossiping about why I won't let them talk about it. I haven't let them put it on social media because of our conversation. You said, if you're going to raise prices, do it now before they see the construction going on. And so I've waited and I'm going to wait until the walls go up and then we're going to do a big thing because people will have settled into the price increases by then. I want the team to understand that. I want them to understand why we're making these choices. I think they felt so left out of any understanding of how the industry works in their other jobs.
There's a lot that I just want to listen back on and just be a better leader for my own organization, just listening to you here, Karen. As we wrap up here, you're set to expand into this new space. What are you most excited about? What is you're in the new location, or you've knocked down that wall. What brings you the biggest joy?
I'd be lying if I didn't say we have designed and constructed the most beautiful exotics ward ever. It is so beautiful. I'm probably going to put a bed in there. No, I think that's what I'm really looking forward to, being able to then bring in more animals and have these little ones seen. And honestly, I'm really looking forward to training the next generation of veterinarians and vet techs who want to work on these birds and small mammals.
Resonates extremely loud with everything you said, that last statement there. Really appreciate the time. This was outstanding. Outstanding.
A lot of fun.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon.